So you're a young, inspired Navy SEAL who wants to serve his country with his life. Nothing is off the limits for you. Saving fellow Marines while putting your own life at risk. Storming into the active warzone where hundreds of bullets are flying every second, and even taking out enemy insurgents from as far as 1.2 miles. But still, this is not enough. You want more. And as you grow older, you desire more blood than ever. And because you are ambitious, you become the deadliest sniper in American history, killing more than 250 people, out of which 160 are even confirmed by your own government. But to say you kill people because you love doing it is just too controversial. So instead, you serve your country the best way you can. And as that turns out, that's by killing as many people as you can. You're not in the killing people for fun business. No, you're in the business of serving your nation. Now, sure, there are millions of SEALs and Marines before you who have done many things which could be considered as heroic back home. But if you follow their same footsteps, how does that make you any different from them? After all, you want to be remembered long after you're gone, and you want to create a legacy of your own. So you serve your nation in the way you feel best. So you go after each and every person who's in their own homeland, minding their own business, which in this case is just usual terrorist stuff. Well, how convenient. Now it's time to show the world who the real good guys are. But deep inside you know that, quote, you don't think of the people you kill as people. They're just targets. You can't think of them as people, with families and jobs. After all, they rule by putting terror in the hearts of innocent people. The things they would do, beheadings, dragging Americans through the streets alive, the things they would do to little boys and women just to keep them terrified and quiet. That part is easy, so you definitely don't have any regrets about that. Welcome, we make video essays and military documentaries just like this. Subscribe for more. And this is the dark truth about Chris Kyle, the deadliest American sniper. As an ambitious Navy SEAL, Chris Kyle even managed to earn a dangerous reputation among the insurgents too, who called him the Devil of Ramadi, which was one of the most dangerous cities in Iraq where Kyle served, and put a bounty on his head. Chris's ego just went through the roof as he started feeling proud of himself, because now even the deadliest of terrorists feared him. Chris had survived 6 IED attacks, 3 gunshot wounds, 2 helicopter crashes, and more surgeries than he could remember in 4 tours of duty in Iraq before he retired in 2009. And although he had his moments of bravery, his life wasn't full of just happy moments of killing foreign nationals. You see, just like every other veteran, Chris had problems with his wife, too. She wanted him to come back home to her and her children, who Chris barely knew, or she would end their marriage. And for Chris, this was the most boring phase of his life, as he himself described it as he had trouble adjusting to civilian life after he returned home. The hardest part about coming home was missing his boys and missing being around them in the action. You see, as an Army veteran, your whole life has been about war. And returning home, away from war, away from hardcore battle, just didn't do it for him. To put it in his own words, you feel like a pussy when you're just walking around a mall or something. You hear someone whining about something at a stoplight and it's like, man, 3 weeks I was getting shot at and you're complaining about I don't even care what. On January 10th, Chris Kyle had just left the Navy and moved back to Texas. On one cold morning, he was out on Highway 67 south of Dallas, where he pulled over to a gas station. 2 guys approached him with pistols and started demanding money and his truck's keys. His hands were up in the air, and he had a quick look at the 2 robbers to understand which one of them was more confident than the other with his gun, as he needed to be taken out first. Chris had been with guns long enough to know what the confidence feels and looks like. Eventually, he was able to identify the most confident robber and then told the robbers that he just needed to reach back into the truck to get the keys. He turned around and reached under his winter coat, and with his right hand, grabbed his handgun and fired 2 shots under his left armpit, hitting one of the 2 men twice in the chest. And then he turned slightly and fired 2 more shots, hitting the other man twice as well, and both men died right there. When police arrived at the scene, they searched for Chris's license, where instead of his contact and residential details, they found a phone number belonging to the Department of Defense. On the other side of the call was a man who described to the police that they were standing in front of one of the most deadly snipers of American history, and he had just returned from battle. And hearing this, the police decided not to drag the veteran into an unnecessary legal situation and let him go free. Except, none of what I told you is true. This story was told by Chris to multiple people at multiple incidents, but whenever any journalist tried to confirm this story, they failed. They couldn't find a single bit of evidence which proved the story to be true. Seems kinda odd. After all, 2 people had died, and that couldn't have gone unnoticed, as even the police were present there, according to Chris. When a reporter asked him if the story was true, Chris said it was. But when news outlets went looking for documentation of the incident, they couldn't find a thing. But crispy and Chris, this wasn't the only incident. Just to portray himself as a hero, he even mentioned he punched former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura at a bar because he allegedly insulted Navy SEALs. And the fight was on. Ventura filed and eventually won the case against Chris and received $1.8 million in damages. So this was a pretty bad loss for Chris. But how could this stop him? He then claimed to have killed at least 30 bad guys with guns who were trying to rob people after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, which most journalists believed is a plain and obvious lie. And later, officials confirmed there were no SEALs deployed in New Orleans during that period. Well, of course. If you've watched the movie American Sniper, you may remember it displaying how Chris was devastated after all the killings, but you know better than that, don't you? To put it in Chris's own words, he only wished he had killed more. He loved what he did, and if circumstances were different, if his family didn't need him, he'd be back in a heartbeat. It was fun, of the highest level. He had the time of his life being a SEAL. We're not even going anywhere near the film, because it's a movie and has creative recreations of the true incidents. But in one of the scenes, Chris is watching the 9/11 attacks footage, and in the next he's there in Iraq, fighting the war and serving the country, implying that there's a relation between the two events, which in turn propagandizes to get the support of the people for the war, who as a result thought that the war in Iraq was a justifiable result of the 9/11 attacks, which we all know is definitely not the case. But here's where it gets interesting. In his book, he mentioned that during an op in Iraq, they found barrels of chemical material meant to be used as biochemical weapons, and the writings on the barrel suggested it came from France and Germany, which are some of the biggest and most important allies of the United States. However, there is no official records or proof available for this claim either, and if it were true, he would have been serving severe punishments for leaking classified info of the operation. So journalists believe yet again that this is just like his other claims and stories and was a complete and utter lie as well. But after all the controversies, it's now time to cover your tracks. After all, you're the good guy, remember? So you're gonna make an announcement, which says you will donate your book's proceeds to veterans charity. Yay! Let people believe that you're gonna donate all your money, while you're only gonna donate about $52,000, even though your book sales are in the millions of copies. There's a bit more profit from that. You see, Chris had told his friends and business associates that he sees all the money he received from the film American Sniper as blood money, and he's going to donate it all. But because he died before he could do all that, his wife had different plans. She didn't want to give away all the money she had gathered from the book sales and movie royalty. After all, she wasn't the one to promise that, right? So you've tried everything, from lying how many people you've killed, both on foreign soil and on the homeland, to giving false promises of donations. He tried to be at a moral high ground at all times against a cake-eating senator and every other minor and major detail you can imagine. But now it's time to show your real worth. And how is the worth of a SEAL measured? Of course, by medals. You see, Silver Star is the 3rd highest medal, given for battlefield conduct, and is considered a prestigious commendation. And Chris had received 1 Silver Star and 3 Bronze Stars during his 10 years of military service and 4 deployments. But is that what you see in the book? Of course not. You see, 1 Silver Star is nothing for the deadliest sniper in American history. You want more of them, but you can't just ask the government for that. Instead, you just claim it. Just casually mention that you received 2 Silver Stars and 5 Bronze Stars in the book, while in reality you only received 1 Silver Star and 3 Bronze Stars. Who's ever gonna notice it, right? Well, unfortunately for Chris, almost all of his friends and commanders at the Navy, who caught the lie and asked him to correct the facts and told him not to fabricate his military record. But you know, Chris, why would he do that? He knows his killing days are over. There's nothing left in the Navy for him. So why not just go home after some cold hard cash? After all, the more medals people think you received, the more heroic you are to them. Just like his life, his death was nothing less than extraordinary. After he retired from the Navy, Chris created Craft International in collaboration with a few of his friends and ex-Navy members. It was a defense contracting company, and Chris used to take veterans to shooting ranges as a sort of therapy. Craft International's official motto was, "Despite what your mama told you, violence does solve problems." On the 2nd of December 2013, Chris Kyle and his friend Chad Littlefield were shot dead in a shooting range. Yes, the deadliest sniper in American history was shot dead in his own shooting range of his own company. Guess mama was right after all. Violence didn't solve the problems, at least not for Chris. The reason of death? Gunshot wound by a 25-year-old Marine named Eddie Ray Ruth, suffering from PTSD and suicidal depression. You see, Eddie's mother had heard of how Chris Kyle met with veterans after they returned home from the war, so she reached out to Chris to ask him if he could help her son. So on the 2nd of December 2013, Chris and his friend Chad went to Eddie on a shooting range to blow off some steam, where Eddie Ray Ruth shot and killed both Chris Kyle and Chad Littlefield, and is now facing life imprisonment for the murders without parole. If you've watched this video until here, it means you're seriously interested in military documentaries and video essays just like this one. So give this video a like, and if you want to watch more of these videos, you can find them on this channel. So subscribe for more, it's free!